What's up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty McNinja, and I know it's been a couple of weeks since I posted a video. I've been crazy busy at work. I've also been really busy playing the new Madden game. If you haven't followed my short content, you may not know that alongside of being a huge gamer, I'm also a pretty big football nerd. So I do, unfortunately, especially if you ask my wife, I play a lot of Madden. And since Madden 24 came out last week, I want to talk about it. So without further ado, let's rock. Just a quick disclaimer, this is going to be more of a franchise mode review than a full Madden 24 review. Franchise mode is the only thing that I play, and I'm tired of pretending it isn't. I like to play pretend GM, where I take a bad team and build them up through the draft and free agency. So while I will touch on presentation and gameplay later in the video, this is essentially going to be a franchise mode review. Madden 24 was released on August 18th. It was developed and published by EA Sports, and it was released on all platforms except for Switch. Now, there are two different versions of the game. The PC version finally is the current generation. By that, I mean the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series S and X generation. However, I played this on PlayStation 5, so if you did happen to play this on PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, some of the things I'm going to talk about in this video won't apply to your version of the game. The first thing that we got to talk about is the fact that they finally brought minicamp back. Now, it's called training camp in this game, but it's really exciting. I know a lot of people were pumped up about this. I don't want to gas EA up too much about bringing something back that we had 10-15 years ago, but credit where credit's due. Minicamp is back and it's a lot of fun. Now, the training camp drills are not exactly the same drills we got years ago. Some of them are, but for the most part, they're brand new. The biggest difference between training camp and minicamp that I can think of is it felt like training camp was much more difficult than I remember, especially if you're using a rookie or a low power player. Like I said earlier, I like to build up bad teams, and the best way to do that is to make rookies and low power players better via skill points, and you can actually get skill points depending on how well you do in training camp. I think pretty much every drill that you do, as long as you get silver or gold, you get a skill point, and that's huge in realistic rebuilds. Unfortunately, you can only do training camp once a season, which makes sense because in the NFL they only have training camp once a season, so it makes sense that you could only do it once in Madden 24. However, there are focus player mini games that are similar to training camp. They're not exactly the same drills, but they're pretty close. They don't give you as much XP as training camp, but it is nice that you can actually do something with your focus players instead of just hitting buttons. The next thing I want to talk about isn't as flashy as training camp. It's not one of those back of the box features that's going to sell you on buying Madden 24. But if you've been playing franchise for a while, especially connected online franchises, this is a big one. Last year, as many of you probably already know, especially if you've been playing connected franchise, you know that a majority of those leagues were just lost. They had server issues and they lost a lot of the connected franchise. So they lost a lot of trust with those commissioners, and they had to do a lot of stuff to gain that trust back in Madden 24. A big thing that they did is they just offered a pretty big discount. I want to say, if I remember correctly, it was 50% off Madden 24 for the people that were affected by the server issues. They also worked really hard on giving franchise commissioners more tools to customize their league. I won't go through all the new settings, but I'll just hit the highlights. There's a ton of new progression and regression sliders. You can actually do it per position and age, so you can really get into the weeds with those sliders. You can also turn home field advantage off. I personally enjoy it, but I play franchise solo. I definitely understand why gamers in these connected franchises would find home field advantage annoying. For any of you fantasy footballers out there who use snake drafts, I personally prefer my leagues to be auction drafts, But if you use that format, you can now use that same snake draft format for your Madden fantasy drafts. I do realistic rebuilds, so I only ever use the Madden fantasy drafts if I'm bored as a breath of fresh air. But if you like snake drafts, you can now use that for your fantasy drafts. You can also tune the free agent motivation, which was a cool feature that they added last year. It definitely could use some TLC, but now you can change the amount of free agents you can sign each stage. And you can also change the trade difficulty. I know that's a kind of a meme now. Anytime a trade happens in the NFL, you will see a bunch of screenshots on Reddit or Twitter where people try to do that same trade in Madden, and it either works too well or it doesn't work at all. And now you can change the trade difficulty. I personally use it a lot when I'm doing quarterbacks. Either I'm trading for a quarterback or I'm trading my quarterback, because in the real NFL, there is a quarterback trade tax. So if you're trading for a quarterback, you usually have to trade more, and vice versa. So I do kind of tinker a little bit with it with the quarterbacks, but for the most part, I don't use it too much. But I saved the best setting for last, coming close. You can now, and I repeat, you can now turn off the depth chart reordering. Hallelujah. Gone are the days where no matter what roster move was done, whether it was an injury or you signed somebody new or whatever, that the AI would just go into your roster and change your depth chart, which I think most people just assumed was a bug, but apparently it was a feature, not a bug. Somebody at EA really thought we wanted this feature, which is wild to me. I don't even want to think about how many hours of my life I've wasted reordering my depth chart just because some third stringer got hurt on special teams. Speaking of depth charts, it is wild to me that in 2023, EA still hasn't added an edge rusher designation. It basically treats the depth chart like every team runs a 4-3, which is not accurate at all. A bunch of teams run 3-4, and yes, there are player prototypes, but you still get in free agency, you will still get 3-4 outside linebackers get signed by 4-3 teams, and they have to play off the ball linebacker because there's no edge rusher designation. But unfortunately, once you get into the day in and day out operations of your franchise, as long as you've played a game in the last 5 years, it's going to feel very, very similar. Unfortunately, the presentation is basically cut and paste from last year. They do make a slightly bigger deal out of the primetime games like Thursday night, Monday night, and so on, but the presentation is essentially the same from last year. The layout of the menus are nearly identical. There's a few things that I'm going to touch on that's slightly different, but for the most part, Madden 24 is just cut and paste as far as the presentation and layout is concerned from Madden 23. One of the bigger additions is with the coach's skill tree. Now, the skill tree itself has been in the game for, I believe, 2 years now, if I remember correctly. And when they added it, I was really excited because it kind of gave a slight RPG element to Madden football, which I was really excited about. But unfortunately, it's kind of sat there unchanged until now. Now, the base mechanic is the same. You get staff points and you can spend them on upgrades. But now with Madden 24, there are now scheme and coordinator specific skill trees. And it just feels like it gives life to each franchise playthrough. You can really hone in on your play style with the different skill trees. There was one change that caught me off guard, and that was I could not, for the life of me, figure out how to change a player's appearance. It caught me off guard because being a seasoned Madden player like myself, unfortunately, I'm so used to everything being cut and paste for years. And when they do change something, they usually make a big deal out of it. And while I heard that they were adding equipment, I didn't know they were changing the menu, so it took me a second to figure out where it was at. But once I did that, I like it for the most part. I think they added a little bit of flavor to the menu, like the player will give you thumbs up every once in a while. I think that's kind of cute. However, some of it could be a little bit more streamlined. I don't love that in order to change your face mask, you have to change the helmet first. I think that's a little goofy. I also think it's kind of silly that you can have two different shoes now. I know that used to be a glitch in the old older games, when you would draft rookies, if you didn't go in and edit their shoes, they would actually play with different shoes. It used to be a glitch, but now apparently you could just do it on purpose now. They also added 3 extra trade slots now. You can still only trade 3 total players, but you can add 3 draft picks to that trade as well. Now, I like that they're giving players more options. I just personally won't ever use that option just because, as I've said like 20 times in this video, I do realistic rebuilds. And if you pay attention to the actual NFL, you probably know that multiple players from the same team don't typically get traded. It's usually one player for a draft pick or multiple draft picks. So I like that they're giving other players more options. I just personally won't use that option. You can also trade draft picks 3 years in advance now, which I appreciate because, again, this is a sim football game and that's how the NFL is. So anything that's going to bring Madden closer to how the NFL actually is, I'm all for. Another thing that's going to bring Madden slightly closer to actual NFL simulation football is you can now restructure contracts in Madden 24. I know this isn't going to be back of the box sell you on Madden 24 feature, but it's definitely something that realistic rebuilders like myself have been asking for forever. The NFL salary cap is dog shit. It's not a real thing. If teams really wanted to spend real money, they could restructure contracts and kind of kick the can down the road. If you disagree with that statement, just look at the Saints. Every year, somebody will say they're going to be in cap hell this year or cap prison or however you want to say it. And every year, free agency comes around and they always find the money to bid on new players because they realize the cap is crap and that you can restructure contracts and just kick the can down the road and it doesn't really matter. And I like the fact that you can now do that in Madden 24. Unfortunately, you still can't front load or back load contracts in Madden, which is a little disappointing because you do see that a lot in the NFL. A guy will sign like a 3-year contract, but all that guaranteed money is in the first year, so they can easily cut him if it doesn't work out after that first year. And I kind of wish that they would have that in Madden. They got close a couple of years ago when they put in the player friendly deals or the team friendly deals, so it's closer to that, but they're still not quite there. So to give them the benefit of the doubt, maybe they're leaving something to improve upon next year because they have to sell us on something next year. Hopefully, keep our fingers crossed that they add it next year. Once you're done with the season and you've signed all the free agents you want to sign, it is time for the draft. The scouting system, which they overhauled a couple of years ago, unfortunately, is the same as last year, which is going to piss some people off because they really don't like the new scouting system. While I certainly don't think it's perfect, it's far and away better than the old system. The draft itself is unchanged as well, which is kind of the theme of this video. Yes, I've talked about a lot of minor changes that they've made in Madden 24, but for the most part, this game is pretty much cut and paste from Madden 23. So you're probably asking yourself, if the draft is exactly the same, why are you bringing it up with this video? Well, we have to go back to, I'm assuming, everyone's favorite part of this video, and that is the sliders talk. There are now sliders for the draft classes. You can now set which positions will be either weak or strong in each class. I personally wouldn't go crazy because I did mess around with this a little bit. And when they say very strong, they are not messing around, because if you accidentally leave a particular position very strong for a couple of years, every team is going to have a generational player in that position. So you want to be very careful when you use these sliders, but it's pretty cool that you now have control over which positions will be weak and strong in each class. Unfortunately, there's still no comp picks for NFL teams yet in Madden, which I think is kind of confusing because it seems like something that'd be pretty easy to implement. And again, this is a sim football game. A lot of teams really count on those comp picks. So the fact that they aren't in this game is really confusing to me. The last major change in franchise mode is they revamped the relocation options. First of all, there's no more owner mode, which is great. Nobody gave a shit about the concession stands anyways. You can relocate in coach mode, which is nice. There's new cities, there's new teams. You can do it right away. You don't have to wait, which is nice. So it's much more streamlined. I am not really a relocation guy, so I didn't really mess with it a ton, but I know a lot of people like relocating, so I'm happy that they finally did something with it. There's still no creative team. I would definitely mess around if there was a creative team. Unfortunately, still not a thing. I know that the NFL's been a little bit weird about creative teams, so that's why it's not in Madden, but hopefully add that to the list of maybe next year. While I did say early in this video that this was basically gonna be a franchise review, I treat this game essentially as a GM sim. I do actually play football in this football game, so I do want to talk about the gameplay really quickly. There's nothing major that they added like they did with Field Sense last year, but there were some slight improvements to the gameplay. They did tweak the AI blocking, and while I have seen people post clips of linemen and fullbacks missing obvious blocks, I'm gonna tell you right now, newsflash, that happens in the real game. You see that all the time. I do think that over the course of the game or the course of a season, the new blocking system is a net positive. Receivers feel much more natural when they catch the ball. They keep running while they catch the ball, which is nice. Because of that, screen passes feel actually usable for the first time in a couple of years now. So again, nothing major as far as the gameplay is concerned, but these slight improvements were really welcome. So after all of that, how do I feel about franchise mode in Madden 24? At the end of the day, I'm pretty positive. I'm gonna give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Yes, as I went along, each section, there was 1 or 2 things that I wish was in this game, but I like to think of myself as a pretty reasonable person, and I understand there's gonna be a new Madden game every year. And I understand that there's only so much that they can add to each one of these games. So while I do appreciate the slight additions that they've made the last couple of years, I do think that they've really worked hard giving us a good franchise mode the last few years. It is hard for me not to think about how badass this franchise mode could be if they had been making these slight improvements the last couple of years. For 10 years, we would have had a really cool franchise mode by now, but it is what it is. I'm glad that we're moving in the right direction. There is a ton of work still to be done, but for the most part, I'm pretty happy with what we got with the franchise mode. But as always, those are just my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below, especially if you do realistic rebuilds. I would love to hear your thoughts on the team I should do next. I started off with the Vikings. I know that they were a good team, but I think they're about to fall off a cliff. Maybe I'm biased because I'm a Bears fan. I also then moved on to the Cardinals, and I am looking for a new team now to do a realistic rebuild. So let me know in the comments down below. Of course, I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash that like button, as the kids say. Consider subscribing. If you do subscribe, ding that bell. That way you get notified every time I post a new video. I try to do weekly gaming related content, so if you like that type of content, definitely consider subscribing and dinging that bell. But until next video, take it easy. What's up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty McNinja, and this is my boy Yoshi, aka Kitty Boy, and we were just talking, and we agree that since you made it this far in the video, you might as well subscribe. You wouldn't want to disappoint Kitty Boy, would you?